Hi friends, welcome back to Lilalicious. I'm Regina, and today we're going to turn these Rosella calyxes into delicious jam. Rosella jam has a sweet, tangy flavor and is wonderful spread on fresh sourdough bread. We also like it to flavor yogurt or ice cream. The Rosella plant is likely to have originated in Africa, but it has spread to many parts of the world that have warm, temperate climates. The plant is called hibiscus septarifa, but is also known by many other names like sorrel, rosella, and jamaica in Mexico. I have never seen them for sale fresh, so the first step would be to grow your own Rosella bushes. If you are in a warmish climate with a long growing season, then Rosella is quite easy to grow actually. You may need to start them in seed trays in late winter or early spring, but then once you plant them out, they're very easy. This is not really a fruit, this is the calyx that engorges and becomes bigger after the flower is done. And then at the end of the season, you can harvest them off the bushes, and it's easiest to do with scissors. They need a lot of washing because of their shape. A lot of dust or little critters can hide in there. I always like to rinse them off with a hose outside, then give them another wash inside before we're going to start separating the calyx outside from the seed pods. And I recommend using latex or rubber gloves because the seed pod on the inside has very small hairs that can actually end up poking you and become irritating. Here you may be able to see that there's just this slight kind of fuzzy, hairy texture on the outside. The easiest I have found is to simply rip off the outer red part and expose the immature seed pod when it's green. We are going to collect these separately because they are not great for jam, but they are full of pectin. And another way would be to cut off the bottom of the calyx, and this exposes the seed pod as well. And then you can simply push it through either with your finger or a straw or a wooden chopstick. And you can do that kind of midair or on a cutting board as well. But I've timed myself doing it a few different methods, and really the easiest is to just rip them off. Although if you push it out, you end up with these beautiful intact flowers, but we're going to cook them down anyway. So I have figured the fastest and easiest is to simply kind of rip them apart. And this may take a while if you have a whole bunch. Here you can see what the seed pod looks like once it's a bit more mature. And we're not going to use those because they are dried out. They don't really have pectin. But if you end up with a more mature seed pod, you can actually remove the blackened seeds from the inside and save them for the next season to grow some more Rosella next year. Here you can see they are black on the inside. In the immature green seed pods, the actual seeds are still white. And then we just keep on going until we have the entire amount done. Place the seed pods in a medium saucepan and add water to just cover the seed pods. Bring them to a boil. We want to extract the natural pectin that they contain. Once they are boiling, cover with a lid and turn down to a simmer, and keep cooking until the seed pods turn translucent and the water will turn from clear and quite liquid to a thick gel-like consistency over the next 30 minutes or so. To help this process along, you can also use a potato masher to squish the seed pods a bit more to help them break down and release the natural pectin. In the meantime, while the seed pods are simmering away, I like to wash the Rosella calyxes one more time, just to remove any last bits of dust, debris, or small insects. And then strain them well to remove as much water as possible. I like to use my salad spinner for that. And then I'm going to weigh the fruit pieces. So I started out my recipe with about 2.2 pounds or 1 kilo of Rosella calyxes, but once I removed the seed pods, I was left with only 1.5 pounds. And you can use about an equal amount of sugar or decrease it slightly. I usually use 1.1 pounds, but you can give it a bit of a taste towards the end and add more if desired. All right, and now you can also see that the seed pods have released a lot of their pectin and the liquid has become nice and gel-like. So let's strain the liquid out from the seed pods, and those can be discarded now, added to a compost. For some reason, my chickens actually really like them. And then squeeze out as much of the liquid as possible from the seed pods and collect it in a bowl. Here you can see our pectin water, which will help set the Rosella jam. Some people don't really do this step of boiling the seed pods, and they say there's enough pectin in the floury parts as is, but just to ensure that the jam really sets, I always take this extra half hour. Combine the pectin water and the calyxes in a large pot. The fruit should be barely covered with water, maybe just below actually. You can add a touch more of plain water if needed. And then bring the mixture to a boil over medium-high heat. Once bubbling, cover with the lid and turn down the heat to low. Then continue to simmer for about 30 minutes while stirring occasionally to make sure it doesn't catch at the bottom. And the stirring will also help to break down the calyxes more. Once they have mostly broken down and disintegrated, add the sugar. I recommend to base the sugar weight on the separated calyx weight and then use anywhere from 70 to 100% of that weight. I'm going to put a couple of sample ratios on the screen. You can also add any optional flavoring ingredients that you like. In this case, I left it pure and simple. Other times I like to give it a nice warming spice flavor by adding a teaspoon of cloves, a teaspoon of allspice berries, a cinnamon stick, or a knob of sliced ginger. Sometimes I use all of these, or just one, or a combination. Once you've added the sugar and flavorings, bring the jam to a boil one more time and then turn down again and simmer for 5 to 10 more minutes. If you find that there is an excessive amount of pink bubbly foam forming on top of the jam, you can see just a little bit here, which usually can be stirred in, and this amount really is not bad, but just for demonstration purposes, if you have a lot, you can add just a small amount of butter. A teaspoon is enough. The small amount of fat will help to break up the foam bubbles, and you can stir it back into the jam. I've never had an issue with the jam not setting after 5 to 10 minutes, but if you want to be very sure that you have boiled it enough, you can also spread a tiny amount onto a saucer that you've placed in the freezer beforehand. You can add it back to the freezer for a minute or two and then check how the jam is behaving. If you can drag your finger across it, you can see a thickened skin has formed on top and it's not running to close the gap quickly, then you know that the jam has boiled enough and will set well. And then in the meantime, you will need to sterilize your jam jars. For this amount of fruit, I needed 3 pint-sized jars, that is 16 ounces, or you can use 6 half-pint jars. Once the jam has reached your desired texture, try to pick out the optional flavoring agents. Definitely remove the cinnamon stick, but if there's some stray clove or allspice berries, that is fine too. Then fill the hot Rosella jam into the clean jars. I'm using a smallish ladle here, but I definitely should have used my canning funnel instead. And then wipe off any jam residue from the sides and the rim of the glass jars, and then close it with the also sterilized lids. To help with the sealing of the jars, you can turn them upside down while still hot. This encourages the creation of a good suction seal. As it cools, the jam will set. Unopened jars will keep in the fridge for several months, but once the jars are opened, we like to use them up within a month or so. You can also process the jam jars in a water bath canner. For that, add the filled jars to a pot and fill with hot water. Make sure the water level covers the jars by 1 to 2 inches. Then bring to a rolling boil, cover and boil for 10 to 15 minutes. Then turn off the heat and let everything cool for about 10 minutes before removing the jars from the water bath. Then let them cool fully to room temperature. This way they are shelf stable for at least a year. Once you have your finished and cooled down Rosella jam, you are ready to enjoy this really most amazing jam of them all. And it's great in yogurt, ice cream, on toast, in sandwich cookies, and so much more. Thank you guys so much for watching and cooking along. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Be sure to like it, follow, and subscribe, and I will see you again soon with another delicious recipe. Bye for now.